Good afternoon. This is a news availability on the state of Hawaii's response to the string of disasters that has hit our state recently, from Hurricane Lane to Kilauea volcanic eruption to April's flooding on Kauai and Oahu. U.S. Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen just received an operational briefing from the state and the Federal Emergency Management Agency FEMA officials on the recovery efforts. Both Secretary and Governor David Ige will be giving brief remarks, after which they will be joined by FEMA Administrator Brock Long, as well as FEMA Region 9 Administrator Bob Fenton, Adjutant General Joe Logan, High EMA Administrator Tom Travis, Rear Admiral Kevin Lunde, Coast Guard 14th District Commander. We have 20 minutes tops because of the Secretary's tight schedule, so we'll keep it brief. To start, Governor David Ige.
Aloha and good afternoon. We all know it's been a very, very hectic time here in the state of Hawaii. Since April, in 4 short months, we've seen massive flooding, unprecedented flooding on Kauai and Oahu, a volcanic eruption on Hawaii Island that has generated more lava and destroyed more homes than in recent memory. Recently, Hurricane Lane caused significant destruction across our island chain. In each instance, the men and women from the Federal Emergency Management Agency have been terrific partners in responding to the challenges and opportunities that these natural events present. You know, I've had personal conversations with Secretary Nielsen, Administrator Long, and even President Trump, really focused on the challenges that our communities were facing, and more importantly, their commitment to a true partnership and relationship to ensure that the people of Hawaii and the visitors who visit our islands would be safe in each of those instances. FEMA has leaned forward to help us prepare. They pre-positioned commodities and equipment in the islands to make sure that should a disaster strike, that the state would be well positioned to respond. They were on the ground during the events. We had representatives from FEMA in the Emergency Operations Center all across the state as soon as the events and the operations had required it. And most importantly, they've been active participants and partners in recovery efforts. You know, I've never seen so many FEMA personnel in the state, in each and every county, to provide expertise, support, advice, allow us to have access to resources, both knowledge as well as personnel resources that we would not have been able to get access to without their support. You know, we do know when a disaster strikes, a state or county does not have all of the assets and capacities that they need to respond to every request for assistance. And I've just been thankful that FEMA and the federal government has been more than responsive. They have been true partners, and we've established a very strong relationship over the past 4 months. We would not be where we are today without the strong leadership and expertise of our FEMA partners. They have executed their mission tirelessly and with great compassion for the people of Hawaii. We are eternally grateful. Today, I've had the opportunity to speak with Secretary Nielsen and Administrator Long and let her know how much the people of Hawaii and the visitors to Hawaii appreciate her leadership and the response of her team. Mahalo, Madam Secretary. I know that we will continue to work together in great partnership to ensure that our communities are resilient and that we can respond and recover when disaster strikes. Mahalo.
And Secretary Nielsen.
Thank you. Aloha and good afternoon. Thank you all for being here. We appreciate it. I appreciate the very important role that you all in the press play in terms of helping our communities understand where we are in the response and making sure that they have the instructions from local officials with respect to how to take care of themselves and their families. I'd like to thank all the gentlemen here that were previously introduced. And I certainly would like to first and foremost thank Governor Ige for his continued partnership, for the open lines of communication, and for the very strong relationship that he has led between state and local government officials in our federal family. Earlier today, as was mentioned, I visited the Hawaii Emergency Operations Center and received a briefing from FEMA and the Hawaii Emergency Management Agency on the response and recovery to Hurricane Lane, but we also took the opportunity to talk about the flooding, forest fires, as well as the volcano eruption. During the briefing, we discussed the strong partnership between all levels of government. I think you see that represented here. And I would second the governor's note that federal officials and state and local officials have been activated side by side since April, and they all deserve our thanks and deep gratitude for all that they do and for the sacrifices they've made and that of their families. I also visited the FEMA Joint Field Office, had the opportunity to personally thank a number of federal officials for their ongoing work. I thank the governor for accompanying me. It's very special for our federal family to have an opportunity to see the governor and to receive his thanks in person. Administrator Long has been visiting the impacted areas over the past few days and is working with Hawaii officials on post-disaster assessments. I want to always thank him for his leadership in continuing to lead the federal response throughout the United States with respect to various emergencies and disasters. Leaning forward, as was mentioned, is very critical in managing events such as Hurricane Lane. We look to partner, plan, practice, pre-position, do what we need to do to make sure that communities are ready. Upon the request of Governor Ige, President Trump moved quickly to declare an emergency for Hawaii on August 22nd, as Hurricane Lane was threatening the islands, and this did enable us to take swift action in conjunction with our state and local partners. More than 2,900 FEMA and other federal responders were deployed and or were supporting Hawaii prior to Lane's arrival. Of those responders, FEMA deployed 3 urban search and rescue teams, 2 incident management assistance teams, and mobile emergency response support personnel and equipment, which remains here today. This was the first response event where FEMA has used its new critical lifeline structure for disaster reporting. The idea here is to clarify which components of a disaster are the most complex and require that cross-sector coordination. The approach will also help us prioritize restoration and response activities. Our initial response, though, is just the beginning. We remain here. We will be here. We are aware of the catastrophic effects that Lane's rainfall and flooding are having in various parts of the state. And we look forward to standing shoulder to shoulder with our local partners as the recovery continues. Preparation is a key factor in building resilience, and I just want to touch on that before I end my remarks. Through Administrator Long's good work and leadership, FEMA and DHS are continuing to focus on building a culture of preparedness. September is almost upon us. September is National Preparedness Month, and I ask viewers everywhere and citizens of Hawaii and throughout the United States to visit ready.gov to learn about life-saving training and other preparedness steps they can take to protect their families, neighbors, and communities should a disaster occur. So with that, mahalo, and we are happy to answer some questions.
Secretary, what were the lessons learned after Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico, and how did it adjust your response and reaction to the disasters here in Hawaii?
We learned, so what we do is, as many of you know, for those who are here as part of the emergency management community, we take each opportunity to learn what we could do better. When it came to Puerto Rico, given the very unique circumstances of the island, we found that we needed to update our logistics planning to make sure that we could account for that unique circumstance. We also looked at the lifeline sectors, which I just mentioned, and the concept there is rather than looking at particular functions in a silo, how can we look at it as what does the community need to get back up and running, and how can we prioritize based on that cross-sectorial view. So we'll continue to utilize that moving forward as a lesson learned. Did anyone want to add anything to? Okay.
Madam Secretary, with all the different events that we're all dealing with right now, I don't know, do you put priorities on each one, or how do you stack them up, and where do you find yourself putting where the most priority?
I might actually turn partly over to the governor because we respond, as you know, per his request.
I would say that it's been a terrific partnership and relationship. You know, FEMA responds to the priorities of the state, which is a reflection of the priorities of the county. So we are in constant contact, federal, state, and county partners and emergency responders. You know, I get the list of priorities from the mayors as they identify different events or different things are occurring in real time. We'll identify the priorities and we pass it up through the chain of command, and the response is appropriate to that.
Madam Secretary, back to Puerto Rico, you mentioned specifically in terms of lessons learned silos and not focusing on silos. Can you elaborate a little more on what you mean by that?
Sure. So the concept is our traditional emergency support function structure is based on the delivery of particular functions, for example, communications or energy, and helping as part of the response and recovery. And the same is true for the recovery support functions. So what we're looking at now is that cross-sectorial view. So for a given community, what is the prioritized need that we are receiving from the governor or mayors or local officials? And how do we prioritize everything that we need to do based on those needs? So, for example, the prioritization of generators. Rather than first come, first serve, you know, how can we look at it in conjunction with the local officials to determine where that need is that can best enable the response? So we're continuing to try to look at it with the interdependencies.
And that's something that you're trying to fine tune and get better at, specifically coming out of Puerto Rico and lessons learned there.
Yeah, I mean, the Administrator could speak more to it. I think we've learned that is a need throughout the 2017 disaster season, which, as you know, was quite a unique disaster season. But part of that, sure, is coming out of lessons learned from Puerto Rico. Did you want to add anything?
Yeah, so it's a great question. One, it's very tough to, you can't compare Puerto Rico and Hawaii. That's apples and oranges. Bottom line is that successful emergency management, response, and recovery is all about unity of effort and partnerships. And you know what I mean by that is that what we're striving for in all of our planning and all of our response and recovery is that we're striving for a system that is locally executed, state managed, and federally supported, not the other way around. FEMA is not a first responder, nor should we be the only responder going into disaster events. And what we're trying to do is, in Puerto Rico, they're about to come into tens of billions of dollars as a result of going through Maria. So how do we bolster the Commonwealth's capability at the local level and the state level that did not exist in emergency management before the storm? And so FEMA is making a big investment in local hires. We've hired over 1,800 local, Puerto Rican citizens to be part of this rebuilding effort because they're going to invest in what the economic and resilient future of Puerto Rico is. When it comes to, Hawaii, here again, what takes precedence is always, are we correctly pre-positioned, not just as a federal government, but at all levels of government when it comes to the life safety piece? The life safety always takes precedent on everything. And so what we always ask is that your local communities, the 4 counties and the state, have pre-event contracts in place and consider how to do their own baseline commodities. But it's not just a government solution. And as the Secretary is saying, we're breaking down critical lifelines And when you start looking at rewriting the national response framework, we need to better incorporate the private sector, because the private sector owns the infrastructure, not FEMA, not government. And what we did coming into Hawaii was right off the bat, instead of saying how much food and water can FEMA bring in, let's assess where the wholesale grocers are right now versus where they want to be. How many days of food are actually on the island? What can they backfill? And instead of FEMA bringing in food and water, how do we keep them open for business and keep that pipeline going? And if it breaks, then we bring in enough pre-positioned food to backfill any gaps that would be there. And it's not just the private sector when it comes to commodities, it's the private sector when it comes to supporting HECO, Hawaii's electric cooperatives, and how do they get back up and running? Do they have enough supplies on island? And if not, where do we need to make sure that we pre-position and get it and push it forward? So here again, it's a whole community. And the other thing is that we have to better utilize citizens in this. We got to stop looking at citizens as survivors only, and how do we tap into citizens to be part of the solution going forward as well. And so that's where we're pushing off READY campaigns and rethinking the READY campaigns that we have. So a lot of thought from last year has gone into Hawaii, which I believe pre-positioned us very well for this event.
We have time for one more question.
I think one other thing I just would want to say is that, FEMA was in every emergency operation centers from ours, from the center opening. And that really helps because they have people in the ground, in the room, as county and state and private sector are really talking about the challenges that are before our community and what's the best response. And they are there to say, oh, by the way, these programs are helpful. And they're on the phone back to the supply chain to say, this is what we see happening. Please get ready for this request, because that's probably what's going to happen next. So it really has been a terrific partnership. And by having people on the ground in the Emergency Operations Center, they truly are part of the total community response to the emergency that's in front of us.
So if I get it, leaning forward means at every level of government?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
One more question.
Hurricane Miriam is threatening to grow stronger today, and Norman's not far behind. Are we prepared for the threat of another potential hurricane?
We continue to monitor with our federal and county partners all of the natural disasters that pose a concern to the community. We are definitely already monitoring Miriam and are looking at what the forecasted track is. And we are starting to monitor Norman. I think we all recognize that hurricane season runs from May until November, and we will continually be partners in monitoring and keeping the community safe 24 hours a day, 365 days out of the year, because that's our collective commitment and collective responsibility.
That concludes our news availability. Thank you for joining us, everyone. If you have additional questions, please see Cindy McMillan or myself after this. Thank you.
Thank you.